The first time my parents charged me rent, I was 16 years old. Not pretend rent. Not one of those teach responsibility lessons parents brag about online. Real rent. $300 a month. Cash. Due on the first. And the strangest part? My older brother Tyler had lived in that same house until he was 22 without paying a single dollar. My name is Naomi Carter. I grew up in a small town outside Atlanta in a family where everything looked normal from the outside. My father coached Little League baseball. My mother sang in the church choir every Sunday. We took matching family photos every Christmas. People thought we were close. But inside our house, love worked more like a rewards program. And my brother was the premium member. If stories about family betrayal, favoritism, emotional survival, and quiet revenge speak to you, subscribe to the channel. These stories are written for people who spent years feeling invisible. And before I continue, tell me honestly, have you ever realized your family treated you differently than your siblings, but nobody would admit it out loud? Because that realization changes you forever. Tyler was 3 years older than me. He played football, drove my father's truck, failed 2 classes senior year, and still got celebrated like he cured cancer. Meanwhile, I made honor roll 6 semesters in a row, and my parents called it what was expected. That was the pattern. Tyler got excuses. I got standards. When Tyler wrecked my father's car at 19, my parents helped him buy another one. When I accidentally cracked my phone screen at 16, my mother said carelessness had consequences and made me pay for it myself. I worked weekends at a grocery store after school. Not because I wanted extra spending money. Because my parents said if I was mature enough to argue, I was mature enough to contribute financially. The rent started 2 weeks after I corrected my father during dinner. That was it. One tiny moment. He told relatives I was lazy, and I laughed because I had worked 6 straight days that week. I said, actually, I work more than Tyler does. Silence. You know those moments where everyone suddenly stops chewing? That kind of silence. My father stared at me for 3 full seconds before saying, if you think you're grown, start paying grown bills. My mother said nothing. Tyler smirked into his mashed potatoes. And just like that, I became a tenant in my childhood home. At first I thought the rent was temporary. Punishment. A lesson. Something parents say when they're angry. But the first of the month came. And my father knocked on my bedroom door, holding a white envelope. Inside was a handwritten receipt. Rent, $300. Utilities, $40. Total due, $340. I remember staring at the paper thinking this could not possibly be real. I was 16. Still in high school. Meanwhile, Tyler was 21. Unemployed, sleeping until noon, and eating groceries I helped pay for. But nobody called him lazy. That word belonged to me. I started picking up extra shifts, closing shifts, weekend shifts. I did homework during lunch breaks because I got home too exhausted to focus. My grades slipped slightly. Not badly. Just enough for my mother to notice. One evening she held up a report card and said, "You're becoming distracted." I wanted to scream. Distracted? I was helping pay their electricity bill. But I already understood something important by then. In families like mine, the truth did not matter. Only the role assigned to you mattered. Tyler was the son with potential. I was the difficult daughter. And difficult daughters are expected to earn love that sons receive freely. The breaking point came the summer before college. I got accepted into Georgia State with partial scholarships. I was ecstatic. Until financial aid paperwork arrived. My parents refused to co-sign my student loans. They said debt built character. 3 weeks later, my father helped Tyler put a down payment on a condo. I found out during dinner. Tyler showed everyone pictures on his phone while my mother cried happy tears. I sat there silently trying to process what I was seeing. Then my father smiled at me and said, "You should be happy for your brother." Something inside me cracked quietly right there at the table. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I stopped expecting fairness from them ever again. I moved out 2 months later. Not to a dorm. I couldn't afford one. I rented a tiny basement apartment from an elderly woman named Miss Evelyn. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The heater barely worked. But it was the first place I had ever lived where I didn't feel emotionally audited. I worked 2 jobs during college. Coffee shop mornings. Library evenings. There were nights I cried from exhaustion in bathroom stalls between shifts. Meanwhile, Tyler's social media showed rooftop parties and vacations my parents helped fund. And somehow, even from 2 cities away, my family still found ways to make me feel guilty. My mother called constantly asking why I visited less. My father asked why I sounded cold. Neither ever asked if I was okay. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was 24, fresh out of grad school, finally financially stable. My mother called crying. She said my father was having money problems. Serious ones. Apparently Tyler's business had failed. The condo was in foreclosure. And my parents had drained most of their retirement helping him. Then came a sentence that almost made me laugh. Your father thinks maybe you could help the family now. The family. Interesting word. Because I had never felt like part of it before. My father got on the phone next. And do you know what he said? We sacrificed a lot raising you. There it was. The invoice. Not written on paper this time, but emotional debt all the same. And suddenly, I remembered every rent envelope, every utility bill, every shift I worked while Tyler slept, every meal eaten under silent resentment. I asked my father one question. I said, "How much rent did Tyler pay?" Silence. Then breathing. Then anger. My father hung up on me. 3 days later, my Aunt Denise called me. She was my mother's older sister, the only person in the family who ever spoke to me like I mattered. She asked if my parents had contacted me for money. I said yes. She sighed heavily and said, "There's something you should know." Apparently my grandmother had left money for both grandchildren before she died. Equal amounts. $40,000 each. But Tyler received his portion immediately at 21. Mine? My parents never told me it existed. They moved the money into an account under my father's control because they said I was too irresponsible. Irresponsible. The girl paying rent at 16. The girl working 2 jobs through college. The girl they refused to help. I felt physically sick. Aunt Denise sent me documents the next morning. Bank statements. Trust paperwork. Transfer records. Every receipt. And suddenly, everything made sense. My parents had not charged me rent because they needed help. They charged me because control made them feel powerful. But now? I had proof. I hired a lawyer the same week. Not because I wanted revenge. Because for the first time in my life, I wanted the truth documented somewhere besides my own memory. My parents panicked when legal letters arrived. My mother cried. My father accused me of betrayal. Tyler called me selfish. Funny. That word always seems to appear when the invisible child finally stops cooperating. The case never went to court. My parents settled privately. I received the full inheritance plus interest. $73,000 total. The money mattered less than what came with it. Confirmation. I used part of the money to buy a small townhouse. Nothing extravagant. Just peaceful. Quiet. Mine. I painted the kitchen sage green. Bought plants for the windows. Filled the shelves with books nobody could criticize me for reading. And slowly, I built a life untouched by guilt. My parents still send occasional messages through relatives. Mostly about forgiveness. Mostly about family. But I've learned something important. People who benefited from your silence will always call boundaries cruelty. That doesn't make them right. Last Thanksgiving I hosted dinner at my house. Friends came. Coworkers came. Miss Evelyn came too. We ate for hours. Laughed loudly. Nobody competed for approval. Nobody kept score. At one point I stood in my kitchen holding a plate of food while everyone talked around me, and I realized something almost painful. This was the first time in my life I had ever experienced what family was actually supposed to feel like. Safe. Warm. Easy. Not earned. Not rented. Just given freely. And if you're listening to this while questioning your own worth because of the people who raised you, hear me carefully. Children should not have to earn basic love. And parents who treat affection like a transaction should not be shocked when their children eventually stop paying emotionally. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and tell me. What's one moment that made you realize your family treated you differently? And subscribe for more stories about family betrayal, emotional survival, and people who finally stopped shrinking themselves just to keep others comfortable.